Hi everyone, my name is Cantor Shifman from Jeshurun congregation. Thank you for joining us via YouTube, and I would like to thank Harriet Mann and Rabbi Rudin Duria, who have worked so extremely hard on putting this together amidst very difficult times. Today's subject matter is going to be about the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, the construct of the letters, and the ability of the letters which form words. Letters and words have to be construed together, as a hand is to a glove, to teach us the magnitude and the power, and they should not be taken for granted. We'll be learning about that in different commentaries, and I'd like to share some thoughts with you as we move into the discussion. There are 22 Hebrew letters in the alphabet. Unlike any other language, every letter is imbued with holiness. Hebrew is referred to as Lashon HaKodesh, which is the holy language or the holy tongue. Each specific letter has a meaning and a numeric value. The Baal Shem Tov, who was known as the father of the Hasidic movement, had a primary student. His name was Rav Dov Ber, the Maggid of Metzrich. And he teaches based upon the very first verse in the book of Genesis, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the world, the heaven and earth, but specifically he points to the word et, the aleph and the tav of the word. And that happens to be, the aleph is the first letter of the alphabet, and the tav is the concluding letter. So he teaches, Rav Dov Ber teaches, that while God created the heavens and the earth, he also created the alphabet. He taught that through the holy creation and the utterances of each and every word, that was created in conjunction with creation itself in the very beginning. As mentioned earlier, each letter has a profound spiritual force. And when you combine them with each other, each and every day through prayer and speaking, it has an effect that will impact the cosmos and the universe. We're told that God created the world with 10 utterances. And during the beginning of these utterances, he used obviously not just letters, but he formed the words to make these utterances. After creation, God made Adam with superior intellect and wisdom, and he allowed Adam, using these letters but combining to make words, to name each animal in accordance to their characteristics based upon his observation of them. There is significance in combining the consonants and the vowels, which allows us to create words and speech. This is of the utmost importance that a Torah is written without any mistakes whatsoever. Over a time period when a Torah is not checked, the letters can begin to corrode as they're written by a special ink on parchment. Once a letter begins to corrode, it doesn't automatically just vanish. Parts of the letter chip away and ultimately can lead to a very problematic circumstance, which is the letter can take on a new shape and thereby change the entire context and meaning of each and every word. All of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the game horseshoes, where you take a horseshoe and you got to get it closest to a marker. When it comes to Torah reading, there is no gray area. It has to be exact, using the exact vowels and letters as intended by God and our rabbis. It cannot be where we sometimes say, well, it was close enough. Close enough is unacceptable, and therefore when somebody does not read correctly, we have to correct them, which is why we have a gabbai on the right and the left side of each reader as he or she reads Torah, to make sure, since they are reading on behalf of the congregation, that they read correctly. This is one of the many things that separate us from other languages. in that there's a very specific and designed purpose for each letter and each word as written in the Torah and as spoken. There are variations as to how the speech is done based upon geographical locations. For example, those that came from Eastern Europe, and they would pronounce sometimes the letter O as oi, the vowel O as oi, or A as O. However, the letters themselves in principle are still the same. And that is really a whole lecture for another time, but just to highlight the impact of vowels and letters when used collectively together. The letters and words in the Torah are more than just statements used to explain verses. They are shrouded in mystical and holy teachings. There is no insignificant letter or word used in the Torah. One of the famous commentators known as the Chidah asked, why do we need to pray with a formal text? Does God not know what is in our hearts? The Chidah explains that it is the combination of these letters when used in words and uttered that cause very specific spiritual forces to be created in the world beyond our comprehension. We need to articulate with these holy letters to arise the spiritual roots of them, thereby gaining the most benefit that God has intended. And how fortunate can we be if we use the letters and the words correctly with the proper kavanah, the proper intent, that will bring benefit not just to us as the individual praying, but benefit collectively to the world that we live in. And as you know, we're all living in a difficult time now, and we can use all of the benefit collectively as a human race possible. We are told during the building of the tabernacle, while Moses received instruction from God, God told him to select Bezalel. Bezalel was the actual builder of the tabernacle, and he had special wisdom imbued with him. Our commentators tell us that the special wisdom that Bezalel had, he had the ability to understand how to combine all of the letters successfully in a holy manner, which would allow for a proper build of the tabernacle as intended by God. When Moses first went up to get the Ten Commandments, the Jews were told of a specific time period that he would be gone for and waited eagerly for him to descend from Mount Sinai with the tablets. Unfortunately, they miscalculated in their calculus and became impatient and thereby gave into the whims and built a golden calf. They were still imbued with idol worship from the time in Egypt. God tells Moses that his children have sinned, and Moses comes down holding the Ten Commandments, and to his mere horror, he sees, instead of what should be a pinnacle and highlighted moment in Jewish history of giving the Ten Commandments, Moses sees that they've done the ultimate sin, which is worshiping another god. He is so angered that he takes the tablets and he throws them to the floor, crushing them. At that instant, as the tablets are being thrown, our sages tell us that all the letters that were carved into the tablets, forming words which were part of the Ten Commandments, all flew back up to heaven, and Moses essentially just had the mere tablets in his hands, which is why he felt fine just to take them and throw them on the floor. God himself engraved the tablets, and they became so immensely heavy. When children are small, which is a time to begin the education process, we're told there's a custom of over 700 years ago where they would create games for children, and they would take a tablet and write the Hebrew letters on. And each time the child would guess the letters, and they'd rearrange them in any specific order, so the child became very proficient. They were made in the letters of honey. And the child would then get a reward for licking the letter. and learning what the letters were. It was a means of making it fun, learning, which is something interesting enough that we're trying to do nowadays as it becomes more challenging, not necessarily with honey, but conceptually speaking, we're trying to make things more interesting for the next generation, whether it be in our religious schools or in our synagogues, making education fun for our children, whereby we're using a game, something that they can relate to, but conversely, making something educational, which will stick with them, just like the honey did with our children. As we understand the letters Aleph through Tav are all-encompassing, what we would call in the English alphabet A through Z, and everything in between. But Aleph through Tav are all-encompassing, and the whole Torah contains everything that we need to know about life. Loosely used, it's a blueprint on how we live our lives. And that's the purpose of the Aleph to Tav, going back to the initial explanation, why the Dov Ber said in the first verse of the world, when the heavens and earth were created, that the Aleph and Tav were used in the phrase et. Everything is all encompassed. Now, once we have created words through letters, we have the ability and the gift of the power of speech. The Talmud teaches us we have some similarities with the angels in heaven, and unfortunately there are also some similarities with animals. The ways we're most similar to angels are that we stand upright like the angels do. We use what's called the Lashon HaKodesh, the Holy Tongue, which is the language of Hebrew, as they do. And we have knowledge and intellect. Unlike animals who act in accordance to their natural instinct, we have the ability to overcome our instinct and to think. We don't always do this, hence the phrase, somebody put their foot in their mouth, because sometimes what's on the lung is on the tongue and we just shoot whatever pops into our head. But this is what separates us from animals. How are we similar to the animalistic creations? Just like animals are required to eat, we are required to eat. Just like animals propagate and have to fulfill their instinct to continue to make produce and the next of kin, so do we. And just like animals have needs that they have to expel from their body, so do human beings. It is no coincidence during Kol Nidre, if you think of the holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur, outside of Shabbat, one of the highlight prayers, which are very early in the service, is a Kol Nidre. The Kol Nidre is all about words, the letters that have formed these words, and vows, and unnecessary oaths that highlight the service, because God wants us to use our Lashon HaKodesh, our holy language and our holy tongue, in the proper way, in the right way, to speak in a respectful manner, not to denigrate people, not to talk with foul language, or to talk in a way that doesn't separate us from the animals at all. So no coincidence whatsoever, Kol Nidre is at the highlight of the Yom Kippur prayer. We're told initially when God first created the world, in the time of the first generation, which was Adam, to the time of Noah. In between that time period, God created the world with everyone speaking Lashon HaKodesh, but at the time of the Tower of Babel, where he mixed up everybody's languages when they were trying to rebel and build these towers to heaven, God then allowed individual nations to come up with their own language. And Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language, just remained with the Jewish people. We see, fast forwarding to a different time in history, when Joseph became the viceroy of Egypt, and Pharaoh understood the magnitude and the holiness of Joseph. One of the areas that Pharaoh was very intimidated of Joseph is Joseph knew one more language than Pharaoh, and that was the language of Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue. There's a wonderful story told where a young man who was a shepherd, you'll see that a shepherd is a very common theme in our Jewish history. People work the land and the animals. And this young boy came to synagogue and he saw everyone praying, and unfortunately he was illiterate. He did not understand the concept of decoding and putting the letters together. But what did he know? He knew from when he was a young man, a little boy, He knew the alphabet by rote. And while everyone was praying enthusiastically and chanting and singing, he began to yell each and individual letter out. The aleph, the bet, the gimel, the daled. He was yelling it out with much exuberance. The people around him became very annoyed with him and wanted to escort him and kick him out of the synagogue. And the rabbi saw the commotion, and he stopped them and said, I want to let you know, at this particular juncture, this young man's prayers, in the way that he understood them to work for him, are being accepted in heaven more so than all of ours combined. And the moral of the story teaches us that when we use the letters in the correct manner, and how much more so that we're given the ability to know how to decode and read, that if we put some feeling and emotion into what we're saying, that we can affect the cosmos, as mentioned earlier, and have our prayers be very meaningful and welcoming before God. There's an interesting teaching in the Talmud, which is called Tantra. And Tantra is the ability to use 4 concepts based upon the creation of the world. And these 4 concepts are as follows, in conjunction with the creation of the world. The Tantra is very simply put, is basically the otiot, which are the letters of the words, which is required for Torah reading. The tagim are these little like accent markers you'll see in the Torah, like little crowns above each and every letter. And then we also have what's known as the vowels, the nekudot. Nekudot are the vowels that help shape the sound of the letters of the word. And last but not least, we have the actual tamei mikra, the actual trope. But we see that from each and every one of these letters and words, one can derive all kind of explanations. I would like to end my teaching today with a very nice story that I heard through involving the Chabad Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. There was a very generous individual that gave a lot of tzedakah, very generous. Obviously, God had blessed him with immense wealth. And the rabbis tell us that, unfortunately, he had a daughter which she was not on the same plane as him and wanted to discover her own use of her education and her knowledge. And she started to explore with many different religions. This man was mortified, and he called the local shaliach, which was a local messenger, to the Chabad rabbi, and he said, you have to do me a favor. Go to the rabbi and pray on my behalf. I need to know what's going on with my daughter. I can't understand. I've set a good example for her, but she's going off the grid and doing her own things. The rabbi sends a message back, the Chabad rabbi, the Rebbe, check all your mezuzahs in your home. So they go and they start putting them one by one off the doorposts. They bring in an expert scribe, and we're told that every one of the mezuzahs checked out. A short while later, she gets more immersed in her studies, and she's looking at Buddha and all different kind of religions in the world, and the man is yet again mortified, and he calls back the emissary again, and he says, please, you have to go back to the Rebbe. We followed his mandate. And the Rebbe yet again says, check the mezuzah. So they decide to check them again in the house, and then the emissary asks, do you have any other properties on this huge property that you have? He says, yeah, we do have this kind of an outhouse, like a guest house on the property that people use in passing. And they go there and they take the mezuzah off there, and they pull off the mezuzah, and lo and behold, in the very first sentence, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, which is spelled with a dalet, time has eroded the mezuzah, and you see that it says Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Acher, spells the word there's a different God. So we see the power of the letters, how it can affect somebody's mazel, and we're told as soon as they fixed the mezuzah, the girl woke up in the morning, and she comes back to her dad and apologizes. She says, I don't know what overcame me. And she finds her way back. In conjunction with the teaching I'm doing today, I'm going to be teaching Shavuot night. And I'm going to specifically break down the construct of each and every letter as far as I can go within an hour time allotment. We'll explain what the letters actually look like, what the numerical value is of each letter. And believe it or not, each letter, for example, Aleph, which means lofty, each letter itself, or the letter Bet, for example, means Bayit, which means house. We'll explain the purpose of what each letter means and the construct of the letter and the numerical value. At this time, I'd like to wish all of you a Chag Sameach. I hope you're all staying safe in your home and well. And we'd like to wish you on behalf of Bnei Jeshurun a very meaningful Chag Sameach. And we should, God willing, celebrate in person next year.